G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff. So, why are liberal women less happy? We see these headlines, many like them, right? Nobody's talking about the hidden truth about feminism, right? And of course that is why conservatives are more happy, right? Men are reading more and doing their own thing. Meanwhile, women who are allegedly liberated are increasingly unhappy. In fact, many would say women are increasingly unhinged. This is not just me talking. These are professional studies that suggest that the perception of liberal women is in fact a reality, that they are not just performing anymore, but in fact they really are mentally ill. Now, YouTube algorithms do not like this. But there is a reported mental health issue that needs raising awareness. Now, there's a increasingly mental health disparity that liberal women are increasingly dissatisfied with their life, particularly 18 to 40, with a significant lower levels of life satisfaction than conservatives. Only about 12% of liberal women can say they are satisfied, compared to 37% of conservative women. So there's a long way to go, right? It's not just liberal women who are right? But conservative women are increasingly happy, while liberal women have a high rate of mental illness, a high rate of depression, a high rate of dissatisfaction. And it comes disproportionately to the rest, the averages of society. And of course, it's driven ideologically. It is, a combination of perceived craziness is ideological and social factors. One, they act crazy for attention. Two, their ideology locks them into a position they cannot change. So if they do not get their way, they are unhappy. Unfortunately, when they get their way, they just want more, increasing their level of dissatisfaction. So they will never be satisfied. We're not talking about the canyon. We are talking about their mental health and levels of happiness and their perceived meaning of life being to meddle in everyone else's affair. And at the end of the day, they have not lived a life. They have lived someone else's and found that there is no satisfaction in living vicariously through others. But political ideology and political priorities have 60% of women viewing abortions as critical, so they go out and have one. And the mental health impact, the toll on doing it, is crushing. Now, those who don't view abortion as a priority have a higher social engagement. So abortion is an extreme political view that causes extreme stress. It's not the fact that abortion is going away, it's stressing about it, constantly thinking about it. And of course, once they've experienced it, the toll and impact of their actions finally catch up with them. Now, media plays a role in highlighting the behavior as trying to normalize it. So they create this archetype, and it's almost satirical at this point, right? Where you see Trump derangement syndrome as an example of liberal instability, yet you see young women repeating the slogans and actions of these few unhinged, and suddenly an entire campus is full of screaming, screeching harpies, and the results are you get Gen Z, who is less literate than millennials. literacy peaked in Gen Y, or early millennials, right? So you have more people going to college who need to learn how to read. Humor is a tool. Our humor is healing us. The more we laugh, the more we experience camaraderie, our health and our mental health is lifting, whereas women's camaraderie is not lifting their mental health. They are dragging each other down. So when you hear there's salvation in numbers, that is not entirely true. There's a lot of context. Right, so rhetoric plays a huge role, right? If you engage in the rhetoric of, political narratives, and as you see with the spread of the disengagement across society, you'll understand there's a reason why we have low birth rates. Now, Kid Rock and many others, political commentators, Kid Rock is, of course, a political commentator, however, that the media love, and researchers love to point to Kid Rock because he's not an expert. He's just an example of the unhinged right. However, even the most, shall I say, left-leaning search engine or AI or whatever you want to call them these days, so increasingly AI, admit they use Kid Rock on purpose because he's not an expert, because liberals view non-experts as irrelevant. That's, of course, increasing their own dissatisfaction in life because they themselves eventually are looking in the mirror and saying, yes, I have all these opinions, but they're follow the science, but it's not working because their own narratives, they poison their own well with their own negativity. So they increasingly question the expertise of those who are political commentators, such as Harry Sisson, asking his qualifications. Now, liberals often do this. When you post something, they often on social media say, "Where are the sources?" And they say, "Where are yours?" You go through all their posts and go, "Where are the sources? Where are the sources?" That increasingly disrupts their thinking because they are so narcissist. They think they're the expert, but where are your sources? What is your expertise in this field? Are you a biologist? And so, yes, you ask, well, are you? I trust the science, but whose science? What are your sources? And so on. They themselves cannot produce anything other than a Harry Sisson video or increasingly Harry Sissy, Pac-Man or Hackman. Increasingly the number of political commentators on the left cannot match the expectations. So when things don't match their expectations, of course, the disparities cause this feedback loop of negativity and social factors. Whenever you try to be non-political, well, unfortunately, the mantra of feminism today is everything cultural is political and everything political is cultural. So they can't socialize. They can't enjoy a movie. They cannot, because they're in this constant analytical state. Now, this has caused this rage. This was, as expressed by Orwell, the purpose of 2 minutes of rage. There is actually a purpose behind it. This is why, rage. I said rage. I often say rage, sorry. The purpose behind 2 minutes of hate was to emotionally involve the audience to ensure the absence of critical thought. The hate session includes participants throwing things at learning to throw things at the mere sight of the the object of their hate. You see, in Orwell, it's described, of course, as when the character of Julia throws things at the television screen showing Goldstein, which of course was leading to why 1984 was going to be banned. But of course, as pointed out by, at the time, all the leading figures in Marxism, feminism, socialism were Jewish, right? This noticing and of course has led to many people being banned or cancelled for merely noticing patterns and trends. And you can actually be in trouble on YouTube or Facebook or even still X today by noticing patterns. And I just don't mean the actions of Jewish activists. I'm talking about all activists now. The crazy liberal women increasingly pointing them out as not the satirical stereotype that was portrayed in the 80s and 90s, but the media themselves have created this stereotype. You see them every Charlie Kirk meeting, every they don't focus on the meeting, they focus on the activists. Once you see the pouncing, on every mistake, every highlighting every flaw or fault or shortcoming on the right, and then on the left you see them trying to increasingly show these activists as some sort of hero, right? A main character syndrome. But in reality, what you're watching is 2 minutes of hate, where Rene Good, the early videos of Rene Good showing it, screaming like a harpy at the ice. So, we're seeing increasingly videos of women, predominantly old women, calling men big man. What you got nothing, you know nothing, you're nobody, and who you bitch. But that's the problem, isn't it? They in their main characters in their own story. But in reality, it's just 2 minutes of hate, right? Where they want to degrade someone who is better than them, stronger than them, so they can feel powerful. But these feelings are temporary, because in their own mind, they need that purpose of hate. So they hate and love at the same time. And often you will find liberal women chasing alpha men and increasingly offering themselves up, increasingly being a thirst trap. You'll see, and once you see, right, the attention they start giving you, you realize that ultimately the dark side of feminism is hypocrisy, right? They are trying to drag each other down, but at the same time, while they're hair pulling, they're reaching up for the alphas to rescue them, right? Increasingly liberal women, though unhappy and lonely, are increasingly in Gen Z reaching out for these few men that they're indoctrinated to perceive as good. Now, of course, this good man is a fiction created by the ruling elite to make sure that increasingly women will only make themselves freely available to the few at the top, thus feeding the ego and the narcissism of the ruling class. And increasingly, feminism is trying to supplant, subvert, and control. So you have this triangle of love, hate, self-loathing, that because they can't get what they want, they cannot have two ideas at the same time, yet they are increasingly trying to convince themselves they can. Or double think. You can have two ideas that contradict each other. The dialectic says so. Yeah, well, just because it's written, I can write the sky is green, doesn't make it green. So while the life satisfaction of women decreases, increasing amount of hatred and anger in society, I doubt that America will boil over. I think Trump will put the pin back in the grenade eventually. That he'll stop being a loose cannon, get through the last year or so of his term, and hand over all the problems that he was unable to fix to the next generation. No president ever. I mean, you look at Roosevelt, he had 4 terms and he achieved less, right? What did he achieve? Did he get America out of the Depression? Took 2.5 terms. Did he, and really it was the America first in, last out, right? Did he address the fundamental flaws? No, he basically bankrupted America by putting the money into the banks to fill the great hole and never dealt with the root causes, and that is the recklessness of the ruling class. See, feminism and the ruling class and Marxism and all other isms, liberalism, collectivism, all rely on hierarchies, and they all mirror each other roughly on the same 7 levels of hierarchy. You have the producing class or the working class. You have the intermediate management class. These are your clerks, your counter managers. Then you have your store managers. Then you have your middle management, regional managers. Then you have your Then you have your state. So you have your city, or so you have your. So let's take it, right. So you've got the workers, right. The intermediate, your teachers, lawyers, your clerks, store clerks. Then you have your store managers. Then you have your state officials and management. You have your national state level bureaucrats, management, and successful businessmen. Then you have your national level, where you have and as you go up each rank, they get less and less, right? Because there's only so many, right? There's only so many mining companies you need. You can't have 1,000 trillionaires. I mean, what are they going to do? Where's all the money going to come from? Where's it? What's other people going to own? Eventually, if society gets too top-heavy, and that's what feminism does. It keeps wanting to rise people up. But by rising people up, you're taking people down. And eventually, it's a house of cards that just lies flat. And because it's all built on hate, they cannot create, only destroy. So, increasingly, but when you get to the top of the national level, you suddenly realise there's the super state, those who exceed the power of the state. The few individuals who control vast companies and networks and financial networks that are so large, like the International Monetary Fund, the UN, the UN missions themselves. Some of the UN missions, like the human rights, international courts of justice, migrants. They have put so much power into them, they exceed the power of individual states, except for the few who could put up their middle finger and say, fuck you, and walk away, and nothing can be done to them. Same with the World Health Organization. And you're at the level where you get past most world leaders. You get to the level of Bill Gates, George Soros, Jeff Bezos, Klaus Schwab, at that very tippy top, you'll have people like Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, but you also have around 800 billionaires, like the King of Saudi Arabia. You have very few people at the top, but increasingly, right, as it gets more top-heavy, even the people at the top realize they've got to tear each other down. This is why you have, right, if it wasn't for feminism constantly destabilizing society, you would have. And we have historically seen functional societies that last a long time, Egypt. But as negativity rises in, right, rises in society, each society gets shorter in its. So you have Egypt lasting for over 5,000 years. You have then Rome and the Mongol Empire, and then the British Empire, and then the American Empire. But in those times, in that last 6,000 years of history, the majority of that history is dominated by Egypt, then dominated by Rome. And then as you get closer to the modern empire, you have the 350 years of the British Empire at its peak. Went through 3 empires. But you have various periods where they're short-lived. And, right, this is why a lot of people already talk about postmodernism and the death of the American empire. But if you look at it simply as the transfer of information, as it increases rapid, it's not information that is the cause of problems. It's the flow of hate. And the flow of hate is predominantly women. But in Iran, as we've seen in Iran, where the feminist revolution has turned into men wanting freedom from the state. We see this now in China. Men, starting with the lying flat movement, the let it rot movement. Now it's the fighting back movement. In America, it is predominantly a peaceful revolution of men going their own way. And it's eroding the power of the state over the individual. And as we see the rise of the rugged individual, we see in that the rise of happiness, the rise of men's health. And this is bothering liberal women because they're ideologically trapped. And there is, I think, increasingly proof, and others have done videos on this, that the lack of religion is the actual, I would not say religion in general. I would say there has to be context, but generally the general lack of a positive moral guiding religion, this is the actual cause, right? That feminism is locking you in a satanic death loop of hate. And this is why we increasingly see the monthly, I would say, articles just on face value for the last 12 months, right? Are we happy yet that more and more adults, as we get older, are less happy? But where that you have the majority of white women with moderate mental health issues, you have the majority of young women increasingly dissatisfied with relationships they've never even had. They're dissatisfied with men, and most of them haven't even had a relationship with a man. That's the ideological capture. That is the lack of a moral religion of right and wrong, truth and subjectiveness and objectiveness, where critical thinking is overridden by social desires. Now, of course, this is the conflict between the decision-making processes in our brain. But as we increasingly use critical analysis, whether you're reading or watching a movie or trying to solve a complex, this is why I think crossword puzzles played such a huge role in people's linguistics, and linguistics led to higher expressions. Higher expressions lead to higher thinking. And this is why I think why originally people with higher educations were more tending to succeed. It's not so much that they were given an education, it's that they educated themselves. They were given the tools, but they followed through. Whereas today, you have parrots. And parrots, because they cannot create, cannot achieve. And that is the darkest of them all, right? That society's being dragged down, right? There's stuff that we can imagine. And I suppose if it's logical enough, such as a starship, it's logical. We find what we increasingly curious about our surroundings, our place in the universe, and most people realize that we are merely fleas on the back of a dog. Sorry, but there is no immediate evidence that we're in our vicinity, that there is any intelligent life, or they are intelligent and They do not consider us intelligent, but normally intelligent life makes contact unless they are really that much different and know the deadly consequences of them, the enlightened, advanced race, and us, the techno-primitive. So there's always a alternative that we must consider, but we should always be aware that our advancement is linked to our happiness. Happy people create, happy people achieve, happy people self-educate and continue to educate and continue to grow. Whereas miserable people tend, and that's why liberalism is all about tearing down, to lock people in a perpetual state of liberalism, misery, and collective. Because if you're alone, afraid, you will collectively congregate around these queen bees who you exploit your misery for their own satisfaction. And of course, that makes them unhappy because they are basing themselves on their view count or their movie ticket sales. But as you see with Jane Fonda or Pokimane or any female influencer, none of them live the life they promote. Yeah, promote. That's the word I'm looking for. It's like Karl Marx. Karl Marx promoted communism, but he lived the life of a capitalist selling books. Bernie Sanders promotes communism, yet is a capitalist who sells books and rents properties and engages in private flights and fundraising. Now, of course, influence peddlers are hypocrites, and that's, again, the dark side of feminism, predominantly influence peddlers, where Mackenzie Bezos, a feminist who J.K. Rowling, another feminist who has a happy family, allegedly, but spends her time social media and somehow writes books. Nothing adds up in this world sometimes. Critical thinkers know there's something wrong, but sometimes it's best just saying, there's something wrong here, and let's not analyse it, let's just laugh at it and move on. And I think that's where we could do ourselves a great service and ask each other, are we okay? Make sure that we do not obsess or get ourselves lost in the weeds. Start becoming overreactive. Put up your hand if you overreact sometimes. Put up your hand if you... I really appreciate, though, when your friends call you out on your shit. And we all need friends. We all need our social circles. It is actually one of the 7 needs. But it doesn't mean that we can't go our own way and accept the fact that people go their own way. And if you understand that, and you can have a good old laugh. I mean, what do you want to be? You want to be a misery guts liberal, or you want to be the alpha male? Yeah, exactly. You want to be the alpha male. You want to be the guy in the room laughing. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it all. Please like, share, and subscribe and all that fun stuff. It helps with the algorithms. Believe it or not, the algorithms increasingly care about the likes. Not so much the dislikes. In fact, if something gets a lot of dislikes, it's still engagement. So, idiots be idiots, right? But increasingly... we hear reports about YouTube algorithms, people trying to work out exactly what is and is not algorithmic friendly. But Google now and again tells us. And yeah, they increasingly are shadow banning. So hopefully I'll find more of this out from and see what is and is not true before I bring it to you. But increasingly, I need your support. To Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. You'll find all my links in the link tree, description below. Scan the QR code on the screen, or have a look at the profile. I do things different. I think I prefer doing endings manually, because at least that way you know I'm not an AI, and increasingly YouTube seems to be out to get anybody who does clips for some reason. So got to be careful about that for some reason, even if you do your own. So don't, all you guys out there doing clips, make sure, all right, if you see increasingly anything, older stuff they don't care about. It's just increasing. I see a lot of people trying to clip modern stuff lately. I don't know why. Some of the big channels get away with stuff that we can't do, but just be very careful. Test the waters, and if you ever run into problems, try to spread the word. Take care. See you in the next video. Bye for now.